Hello. My name is Delith Morrow, and tonight, my own sister will call me trash in a language she thinks I don't understand, in front of people who sip wine like truth can't ferment. And I'll sit there, smiling. Because I've waited my entire life for this moment. And they don't know, they've already lost. The evening air in Charleston carried a sweetness that almost fooled me. The glow from the restaurant's sign reflected off the polished cars parked along the curb, and for a moment, it looked like the kind of night when families came together. I told myself it was just another dinner, another performance of being polite, of pretending, but deep down, my stomach already knew it wasn't. Inside, the lights were soft, almost too warm. Jazz spilled from hidden speakers, the kind that sounds effortless but hides precision. The table stretched endlessly, draped in linen that could have paid someone's rent. Faces turned when I entered, smiles that flickered on like porch lights at dusk, pleasant and empty. My sister, Isolde, rose halfway, kissed the air near my cheek, and gestured to the empty seat across from her. "Traffic again," she said, voice as smooth as a news anchor's. "Charleston Bridge," I replied. My words felt heavier than they should have. I noticed the details because that's what you do when you don't belong. You memorize what everyone else takes for granted. The crystal glasses. The smell of rosemary and champagne. My mother, Maribel, at the far end, laughing softly with Isolde's in-laws as though I were another guest, not her daughter. Dinner began. Forks chimed lightly. I tried to match their rhythm, my hands steady even as my mind tugged at invisible threads. Then it happened. Isolde leaned toward her in-laws, a smile dancing on her lips. I heard her switch languages so easily, like flipping a coin. Ella es solo basura. They chuckled politely, the kind of laugh people use when cruelty sounds like charm. Then, in English, she added, "She doesn't understand Spanish anyway." My glass trembled in my hand. The wine swayed like it wanted to escape. The words didn't surprise me, they just landed differently this time. I'd learned Spanish years ago, when Dad still believed both his daughters deserved investment. I hadn't used it since he died, but memory doesn't fade when it hurts. I sat there, the sound of laughter tightening around me. The air smelled sharper now, like citrus gone bad. I looked at my mother, expecting something, anything, but she smiled faintly, as if she hadn't heard. Or worse, as if she had. The silence after the joke wasn't empty. It was alive, pulsing, feeding on my restraint. I excused myself before my voice could betray me. The restroom mirror reflected someone calm, elegant, unbothered. But my reflection's jaw was set too tight. My lipstick had smudged, streaked against the napkin in my hand. The stain looked almost like blood. "They think I don't understand," I whispered. "Maybe that's my advantage." The words tasted bitter and new, like something I wasn't supposed to say out loud. When I returned, Isolde lifted her glass. "To family unity," she said brightly. The table echoed her words, glasses clinking like well-rehearsed applause. I sat, nodding, but the irony burned. Renzo, one of Dad's old business partners, caught my eye from the far end of the table. His expression wasn't pity, it was recognition. He knew what was happening. He'd seen this kind of theater before. Isolde turned to me, smiling too sweetly. "You're quiet tonight, Delaware." I kept my tone even. I only speak when I'm sure someone wants to listen. Her laughter came too quickly, and the others followed, unsure if they were laughing with her or at me. I didn't care which. The rest of dinner blurred, the speeches about the company's success, the stories about our family legacy, all told in a way that somehow erased my name. My mother's pearls gleamed under the chandelier, each glint like a reminder of the distance between what we looked like and what we were. When the plates were cleared, I offered to help. Maribel waved me off. "You've worked enough today, darling. Just relax." That word, darling, landed wrong. It sounded like dismissal disguised as affection. Outside, the air felt cooler, kinder. The city hummed with the soft buzz of cicadas and river wind. I walked to my car slowly, heels clicking against the pavement like a countdown. The windows of the restaurant glowed behind me, golden and false. Through the glass, I could see them laughing again. I unlocked my car but didn't start it. My hands rested on the wheel, steady but strange, like they belonged to someone else. The music from inside drifted faintly into the night. "They thought I couldn't understand them," I said softly, the words forming their own quiet vow. "But I did. Every word. And this time, I'm not forgetting." The wind carried the faint scent of the river as I sat there, the engine off, the silence pressing in. For the first time in a long while, my stillness didn't mean surrender, it meant I was waiting. The morning came too soon. I opened my eyes to light crawling through the blinds like an uninvited guest. For a few seconds, I thought maybe last night had been a bad dream, one of those emotional hangovers that fades with coffee. But my stomach told me otherwise. The kind of heaviness that doesn't leave with sunlight. I reached for my phone, more out of habit than hope. Notifications blinked on the screen. Pictures from the dinner had already made their way to social media. I clicked one. There was my mother, her pearls catching the chandelier light. Isolde beside her, perfect posture, perfect smile. Her in-laws beaming. The caption read, "Family dinner with the best people." I stared longer than I should have. My face wasn't there. Not blurred, not cropped, just not there. Like I hadn't been invited in the first place. My breath hitched softly, the kind of sound you make when something sharp brushes your skin. I whispered to myself, they posed like I'd never been there. The phone screen dimmed as if agreeing. The scent of coffee drifted through the apartment as I tried to shake it off. I told myself it didn't matter. That I was too old to care about family photos. But denial doesn't hold long when you've been excluded by design. The ache was quiet, but it was the kind that doesn't let go. Gently, I set the phone face down and exhaled. By noon, I drove to the company headquarters to drop off some reports. The front office looked like it always had, polished, professional, and cold. I passed a tall printed board leaning against the wall, "Thank you to our 20th anniversary gala contributors." Rows of names were printed in elegant serif type. My eyes scanned down until they froze. Emily Morrow, logistics assistant. I blinked. Read it again. Emily. Assistant. My own name, misplaced and demoted. A young staffer walked by, carrying files, smiling with the kind of brightness that belongs to people who don't yet know disappointment. "Oh. You must be Isolde's assistant, right? You did such a great job last night." I opened my mouth, but the words stuck. It wasn't worth explaining. They wouldn't understand anyway. "Thanks," I said softly, my voice almost kind. It surprised even me. Inside my chest, something thin cracked, not loud, but definite. I could feel it. Quietly. I walked through the hall, familiar with every detail, yet it all looked staged, like a showroom pretending to be a family business. I stopped at the reception desk. The girl behind it smiled. "Morning, Mrs. Morrow. You here for the gala prep?" "No," I said. "Just clearing a few things." I smiled back, practiced, almost natural. The kind of smile you learn when truth isn't safe to show. Back in the parking lot, Renzo's text arrived. "Are you attending the gala next week?" I frowned. I hadn't received an invitation. I opened the company portal on my phone. There it was, the official guest list. Alphabetical. Every executive, every partner, every vendor. No Deleth Morrow. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. It was worse than that, too calm. A steady kind of cold, like realizing the water you've been drinking has been poisoned for years. It wasn't a typo. It wasn't an oversight. It was a choice. By 3, I found myself standing outside my mother's office door, the words Maribel Morrow, founder carved into brass. I knocked. She looked up, eyes warm, voice polished. "Darling, you were at dinner last night, weren't you? I heard such wonderful things from Isolde's in-laws." Her tone made me feel 12 again. Small. Grateful to be acknowledged. "I saw the gala board," I said. "My name was listed wrong." She waved a manicured hand, still smiling. "Oh, that's just a typo. We'll fix it if it matters that much to you." If it matters that much to you. The words landed like dust, soft but suffocating. I wanted to ask her why she didn't flinch when people mistook me for a stranger. Why she never corrected them. But the office smelled like lavender and professionalism, and I didn't want to bleed where everything was upholstered in beige. So I just nodded. "Sure, Mom." She looked relieved, as if I'd just saved her from an inconvenience rather than heartbreak. Driving home, I kept the radio off. The quiet wasn't peaceful, it was precise. Every thought echoed louder in silence. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Same eyes, same mouth, same tired calm. I wondered when exactly I stopped fighting for space in this family's narrative. Maybe the first time I decided silence was easier than confrontation. Maybe long before that. When I parked at the office again later that week, something inside me resisted turning off the engine. But I did. Because routine is stronger than rebellion when you've spent years rehearsing it. I sat there, the same spot as always, the same sound of cicadas faint outside. The difference was what lived inside me now. Not rage, not confusion, just clarity. They hadn't forgotten me. Forgetting requires carelessness. This was deliberate. I opened my phone again, scrolled through the photo one last time, zooming in until the pixels blurred. My mother's smile. My sister's posture. The world they built without me in the frame. I didn't vanish, I whispered. They erased me one decision at a time. And I let them. My voice didn't tremble. It didn't need to. The words were steady, like a contract finally signed. Quietly, I started the car. The engine hummed low, the dashboard lights flickering soft gold. The city outside looked the same, but I wasn't. I wasn't done being erased, but I was finally done pretending it didn't hurt. The morning after the notary signed the final page, clarity arrived, but not the kind that heals. It was the kind that exposes. The kind that takes off the gloves and shows you what your heart didn't want to name. I moved through my apartment in silence. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that wraps around you like insulation. I wasn't floating, I was functioning. I showered, made tea, folded the throw blanket I never used. Still, everything felt just a degree off. On the dining table sat the folder I'd brought home from work. Unopened. A silent witness to a part of my life I was no longer sure belonged to me. I walked past it twice, maybe 3 times, before leaving it there like a dare I didn't need to take. By early afternoon, I was back at the venue for the gala rehearsal. The ballroom was a cathedral of light, overhead chandeliers glittering like polished secrets. Isolde's voice rang out before I even saw her. She was directing the catering team, her every instruction wrapped in that trademark poise, crisp, sweet, and completely performative. I used to admire how she handled rooms, how she mastered attention without seeming to demand it. Now it just felt like theater. The tables gleamed under overhead lighting. White linen. Crystal. Folded napkins like origami swans. I knew the layout by heart, I'd helped design it 3 galas ago. My hands moved without needing orders, adjusting flatware, straightening place cards, folding a napkin that had already been folded. I was trying to disappear into the work. Then it happened. A man I didn't recognize walked in early, coat in hand. He smiled, a soft, indifferent smile. Polite. Painless. Practiced. "Could you hang this for me?" he asked, extending the coat. For a second, I froze. The fabric felt heavier than it should have, like it knew what it meant. Still, I nodded, taking it carefully. Across the room, Isolde's eyes met mine. She held my gaze for half a second, then looked away. She didn't correct him. Didn't say my name. Didn't tell him I wasn't staff. And that's when it hit me. Even silence can be complicity. And today, I was complicit in my own vanishing. I walked to the coat rack slowly, deliberately, like I was folding a flag at a funeral. My fingers brushed the fabric, smooth, expensive, anonymous. Just like every version of myself they'd ever permitted. Efficient. Present. Unnamed. That night, back home, I sat on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through the family group chat. The screen glowed in the dim room. Messages poured in, catering updates, vendor links, seating chart adjustments. I typed slowly. Thinking of Dad this week. He would have loved the gala. I waited. 1 minute. Then 2. No response. 2 minutes later, Isolde posted a photo of the new wine labels. "Dad's favorite vintage," she wrote. The chat lit up with hearts, reactions, and praise. Even Mom chimed in, "Beautiful choice, sweetheart." No one mentioned my message. Not even a pity emoji. Not even an accidental thumbs up. It wasn't the silence of grief. It was the silence of selection. Of intentional omission. I closed the app. Let the screen fade in my hand. I used to believe silence was grace, I whispered to no one, but it's just how people make room for lies. The next day, the rehearsal resumed. I stood near the stage, clipboard in hand, trying not to be in the way but somehow always in the margins. That's when Maribel arrived. She glowed, as always, in her curated way, hair just right, lipstick fresh, smile perfectly measured. Isolde followed closely behind her, carrying a small velvet box. She beamed as she held it out. "This is for you, Mom," she said. "We thought you'd love it." Mary Bell opened the box and gasped like a character in a play. Inside was a delicate bracelet, engraved with the family motto. Her voice caught, touched. "Oh, sweetheart, it's perfect. You're too thoughtful." Applause broke out. Small. Polite. Perfect. Except. I had ordered that bracelet 2 weeks ago. Custom engraving. My card. My idea. As Mary Bell leaned in to hug Isolde, something slipped out of the box. A folded receipt. Thin, quiet. It floated to the floor like truth with wings. I watched it land. My handwriting stared back at me. My name. My shipping address. Isolde's eyes caught it. She looked down, then up, calculating, rehearsing. No one else moved. I walked over, picked up the paper, and flattened the crease. "I ordered it," I said, just loud enough to be heard. Isolde didn't face me fully. She turned her head slightly and smiled, calm, sweet, poisonous. "Of course. We all had a hand in it." Mary Bell didn't blink. She smiled back, still glowing. Her gratitude floated toward the wrong daughter. My heartbeat felt like thunder in a room built for whispers. I wanted to scream. To hold the receipt up in the air and demand acknowledgement. But the room was too polished for protest. Too practiced. So instead, I folded the paper again. Set it on the edge of the podium. And stepped back. Later that evening, after most of the guests had trickled out and the lights had dimmed, I stood near the corridor exit. Renzo found me there. Tie loosened. Expression somber. "You let them do that?" he asked. I met his eyes. "It's not about the jewelry." He nodded slowly. "No. It's about who's allowed to matter." Something inside me shifted, not hope, not anger, but memory. Not the kind that fades. The kind that roots itself deep and refuses to be painted over. When the rehearsal finally ended, I returned to the stage. The podium still held the folded receipt, waiting like a question no one had asked. I picked it up. Walked to Mary Bell's office. Her lamp was still on. I stepped inside, placed the paper on her desk. Right in the center. No note. No speech. And walked out. No confrontation. No spotlight. Just truth, left like a breadcrumb. Outside, the night smelled faintly of rain. The pavement shimmered with the kind of clean that only comes after something breaks. In the reflection of the glass doors, I saw myself. I looked older. But I also looked freer. I walked to my car. My steps were steady. My breath even. And for the first time in a long while, I realized. I hadn't fought. I hadn't begged. I hadn't yelled. But I had done something far more dangerous. I had refused to let them lie uninterrupted. And somewhere between silence and recognition, I had begun something. Something irreversible. Something mine. By the end of that week, the air carried the weight of celebration I couldn't feel. Charleston's waterfront glittered under the city lights, dressed for the gala like it wanted to outshine the people attending it. My dress was plain, muted gray, the kind that doesn't compete but refuses to disappear. I arrived alone. No chauffeur, no escort. Just me in a small wrapped box sitting quietly in my hands. The invitation, printed in gold, had said, "Family is legacy." I wondered which family they meant. Inside, everything shimmered. Crystal towers of champagne reached toward chandeliers. Isolde moved through the crowd like she'd been rehearsing her whole life, one practiced laugh, one polished gesture at a time. Mary Bell stood near the stage, her pearls catching the light, her smile gracious and fixed. I placed my gift among the others on the display table. The wrapping was simple, deep blue paper, a silver ribbon tied in a small bow. Thoughtful but unassuming. It sat neatly between lavish boxes wrapped in gold and red. As the night went on, laughter swelled, champagne flowed, speeches filled the air. When the time came for gifts to be opened, Isolde made a production out of it, thanking guests, calling names, unwrapping boxes. Each sound of paper tearing was followed by applause. And then mine remained. Alone. Unopened. "Maybe they'll save it for last," someone whispered beside me. They didn't. By the end of the evening, the blue box sat untouched, its ribbons still perfect. A quiet detail no one would notice except the person who brought it. I smiled anyway. A small, practiced smile. Sometimes silence is just cruelty disguised as manners, I thought softly. Dinner followed. Silverware clinked gently, and the sound of a jazz quartet floated through the room. I sat at the end of the table, no spotlight, no microphone. Isolde rose to give her speech, the crowd turning their attention toward her. "Tonight," she began, "we honor our beginnings. When my mother and I rebuilt this company from our little garage, we never imagined this." Applause. Laughter. Glasses lifted. My fingers tightened around my napkin. I remembered that garage. The smell of paint. My hands blistering as I rolled fresh coats across those concrete walls. The invoices I'd signed, the vendors I'd called. They weren't lying. They just told a version of the story that didn't need me. I glanced at Maribel. She beamed at Isolde, her pride glowing, her approval absolute. It wasn't malice, it was convenience. In her eyes, the truth was negotiable if it kept the family looking whole. My chest felt hollow but steady. Quietly, I took a sip of water instead of wine. When the applause settled, a large screen descended from the ceiling. A tribute video played, 5 minutes long, spanning 2 decades of business and milestones. The first restaurant, the first magazine feature, the first expansion. Each image felt like a breath stolen from memory. And yet, my face was nowhere. My name, missing. A man sitting beside me leaned closer, his voice low. "Didn't you work there back then?" I nodded once. "Yes." He smiled awkwardly. "Well, guess they ran out of photos." I smiled back. Or maybe they just ran out of space for me. The film ended with applause, followed by Isolde's gracious thanks. My heartbeat felt heavy, slow, deliberate. Something inside me shifted, not from pain but from recognition. They were rewriting the story while I was still in the room. Later, in the hallway, I found Isolde adjusting her hair in a mirror. Her reflection caught mine. "Why am I not in the video?" I asked quietly. She turned, lips curved, voice smooth. "It's a brand piece, Delaware. We didn't want to confuse the story." "It's not confusing," I said. "It's the truth." Maribel appeared then, perfectly timed. "Honey," she said lightly, "it's just PR. It doesn't mean anything." I looked at both of them, the woman who gave me life and the woman who took over it. "To you," I whispered, "maybe." For a moment, Isolde's eyes faltered. Then she smiled again, a flash of victory mistaken for grace. "You shouldn't take things so personally, Delaware. You've always been sensitive." "Sensitive," I repeated softly. "That's what people call honesty when it makes them uncomfortable." They didn't answer. The silence between us felt final, like a door sealing shut. At home later that night, I turned on a single lamp and sat at my desk. The air smelled faintly of paper and dust, the scent of years gone unacknowledged. I opened a drawer and pulled out my old project files. Photos. Contracts. The first payroll list, my handwriting still visible in blue ink. Proof. One by one, I laid the papers across the table, aligning the edges carefully, as if restoring order could restore faith. My reflection in the glass of a framed photo looked unfamiliar, older, sharper, less forgiving. I slid everything into a leather portfolio. I wasn't planning to show it. Not yet. But I needed to know that something existed outside their edited version of history. As I closed the latch, my pulse steadied. I wasn't angry anymore. Just awake. "If they keep erasing me," I said softly to the empty room, "I'll become the sharpest part of their memory." I leaned back, eyes closed, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the quiet of the house. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. Tomorrow would come with more stories told without me. But for the first time, I had one of my own. The next week began with a strange calm, the kind that comes after you've stopped expecting fairness. I woke before dawn, dressed quietly, and drove to the office with the radio off. The city outside my window blurred into a streak of streetlights and fog. There was a rhythm to Charleston in the early morning, steady and indifferent, like it didn't care what kind of truth people buried under its charm. By 8, the boardroom was full. Conversations floated in half-whispers and polite laughter. I slipped into my usual place, or what used to be mine. My chair was moved to the far end, near the hallway entrance, back facing the screen. The place card on the table read Emila Morrow. For a moment, I thought it was a joke. Then I realized it wasn't funny. A junior manager leaned toward me, smiling nervously. "Oh, sorry, are you just observing today?" I smiled faintly, that brittle kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Apparently." Taking out my pen, I drew a clean line through Emila, and wrote my name, Deleth. Slowly, deliberately, like signing a will. The meeting began. Charts, forecasts, sales targets. The usual performance of progress. Isolde stood at the front, speaking with authority, her voice as polished as the glass windows behind her. She talked about growth, partnerships, family values. Every word smooth like glass, cutting without showing a blade. Halfway through, a logistics issue came up, vendor contracts unsigned, deliveries delayed. The air tightened. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Isolde's tone stayed calm, too calm. That would have been Deleth's side, I think. Heads turned toward me. Maribel's expression stiffened, worry clouded by embarrassment. I said nothing. I'd learned long ago that silence unsettles people more than protest. Then, before anyone could continue, the door opened. An assistant walked in, holding a stack of papers. "Excuse me," she said. "Just clarifying, the unsigned contracts were already flagged 3 weeks ago. Deleth sent the warning email herself. Here's the paper trail." The room shifted. Chairs creaked. Eyes turned back toward Isolde. Her expression didn't break. She smiled, cool, dismissive. Of course. Must have been a communication slip. No apology. Just a graceful retreat. I watched her carefully, the way you study an animal that's learned to bite without showing its teeth. Maribel cleared her throat softly. "Let's move on, shall we?" But something inside me didn't move on. It anchored. After the meeting, the hallway felt narrower than usual. I caught up with Isolde near the elevator. "Don't do that again," I said quietly. She turned, eyebrows raised. "Do what?" "Blame me for your shortcuts." Her smile tightened. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being accurate. There's a difference." The elevator doors opened, but neither of us stepped in. The silence between us hummed louder than the machinery. "You know, Del," she said finally, her tone dripping with something that pretended to be pity, "you've always struggled with hierarchy. It's not personal, it's just business." I took a breath, even and slow. Funny how business always looks personal when it's someone else's name on the line. The doors closed. I walked away first. Later that afternoon, I sat at my desk, the screen light washing over my face. I opened my email, found the chain of correspondence proving my point. Without hesitation, I forwarded it to Maribel with a single line, "For record keeping." Then I BCC'd Renzo. No explanations. No extra words. The truth didn't need decoration, it only needed witnesses. My hands didn't tremble. They used to, once, after every argument, every humiliation disguised as miscommunication. Not anymore. The next time they come for my name, I thought quietly, they'll find it wearing armor. That night, I returned home exhausted but calm. The house was dim except for the kitchen light. I made tea, the kind my father used to drink late at night when numbers and people tired him in equal measure. The computer sat on the counter, its glow small but insistent. I opened the company email settings, clicked on my profile. The title beneath my name read Support Liaison. I deleted it. Typed co-founder. The cursor blinked once, like a heartbeat. Then it held steady. It wasn't revenge, it was restoration. As the kettle hissed softly, I thought about how quiet victories often go unnoticed. No one claps. No one congratulates you. But you feel something lock into place inside, something that says, you're not invisible anymore. When the tea was ready, I stood by the window, watching headlights trace lines across the wet street. My reflection in the glass looked both tired and alive. "They wanted to write me out," I whispered. "I've started writing myself in." The words lingered in the air, gentle but firm, like a door closing softly after years of being left open. The morning light felt colder than usual, sharp through the blinds, as if the day itself had something to prove. I drove to one of the cafes the company owned, one of the many I had helped build when we were still small, still honest. I used to walk into these places and feel pride, like the walls remembered the hands that painted them. But this morning, pride had turned stale, like coffee left too long on the burner. The cafe manager, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled when she saw me. "We just launched the new spring menu," she said brightly. "You'll love it." I took one of the glossy menus from the counter. The smell of paper and espresso hit me all at once, warm, familiar, and suddenly sour. My eyes went down the list until they stopped. There it was. The dish I'd created during the pandemic, born out of scraps, long hours, and my father's old recipe notes. I'd called it the Morrow brunch plate. Simple, elegant. Ours. Now, printed in soft cursive, it read, Ashley's Heritage Plate. My chest tightened. The name sat there on the page like theft disguised as tribute. I looked up. Who approved this? The manager hesitated. It came from HQ. Some branding realignment, I think. Ms. Isolde wanted everything to sound cohesive across the properties. Cohesive. A word that could erase a decade of effort in 3 syllables. I smiled, polite, careful. Thank you, I said softly. When I stepped outside, I pulled my phone from my coat pocket, took a photo of the menu, and emailed it to myself. Subject line, Exhibit A. It wasn't anger that burned in me, it was focus. Later that afternoon, I stopped by Maribel's house. She was hosting a small tea gathering, the kind she liked best, just enough people to make her feel adored, not enough to make her work. I was helping Callan, Isolde's son, with a puzzle on the rug when one of the guests bent down, smiling. And who's this lovely lady, sweetheart? Callan didn't hesitate. That's Mommy's helper. The room filled with polite laughter. I froze, one puzzle piece still in my hand. Maribel waved a hand. Kids say the funniest things, don't they? Funny. That word again. The way people cover cruelty in sugar. I smiled at Callan, because it wasn't his fault. He just repeated what he'd been taught. The lie had already reached his generation. Quietly, gently, I set the puzzle piece down. By the end of the afternoon, I could feel the tightness behind my ribs, the kind that comes from swallowing too many small humiliations. I excused myself, stepping outside for air. The garden smelled of jasmine and rain-soaked soil. My father used to plant herbs here. He believed every space could grow something honest if you tended it right. Now, it was all ornamental. Pretty, but useless. The next day, the family had arranged a photo session, 3 generations of women. Maribel had coordinated everything down to the shades of cream and gold. The photographer adjusted lights while Isolde fussed over her daughter's dress. I waited near the door, smoothing the wrinkles in my blouse. I wasn't on the call sheet, but it was family, so I assumed. They lined up, Maribel, Isolde, and the little girl. Perfect symmetry. Would you like me in? I asked quietly, stepping closer. Maribel hesitated, then smiled with that tender cruelty she'd perfected over years of avoidance. This one's just the direct line, sweetie. Sweetie. The word fell like a closing curtain. I stepped back. The flash went off. Once, twice. The sound was small, but it might as well have been thunder. In that moment, I understood how permanent absence can look in a photograph. When the photographer packed up, Isolde walked past me, perfume trailing behind her. She didn't look guilty. She looked pleased. Later, as everyone gathered for dinner, I sat across from her. My fork traced circles around my plate. Why do you keep renaming what I made? I asked quietly. She looked up, eyes calm, voice sharper than her tone. Because people don't associate you with legacy. For a second, the room tilted. I set my fork down. Legacy doesn't need a name tag, I said. It just needs the truth. She smirked. Truth is what people remember, Delaware. Not what you insist on reminding them. Maribel cleared her throat, trying to shift the air. Let's not do this now. But it was already done. The line between mistake and malice had disappeared. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small flash drive. I placed it gently on the table between us. This has every recipe. Every signature. Every timestamp. My voice was even, almost calm. If you're going to rename me, rename these too. Isolde stared at it. Her jaw flexed. You wouldn't. I smiled softly. You'd be surprised what silence can remember. No one spoke after that. The only sound was the clinking of glass as Maribel reached for her drink, her hand trembling slightly. I stood, picking up my coat. You used my silence like seasoning, I said. I hope it chokes the taste now. The words landed gently, but they carried weight. Not loud, not cruel, just true. When I stepped outside, the evening air was thick and warm. The moon hung low, pale against the Charleston sky. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own story. Quietly, slowly, I walked to my car, the gravel crunching under my shoes. Healing didn't happen all at once. It happened like this, one refusal, one truth, one step toward reclaiming what was mine. The morning didn't just begin with silence, it began with that kind of silence. The kind that prickles beneath your skin. Not peace. Not calm. Something closer to warning. The clock ticked with mechanical precision. The kettle murmured, a low, aimless hum. But the house, the air, the world beyond the glass windows, they all felt suspended. As if the universe had paused its breath, waiting for the smallest crack to echo. I sat at my desk, fingers resting on the keyboard, watching the screen blink to life. The laptop greeted me with the usual blue glow, a soft familiarity I never questioned, until I did. Password error. My pulse didn't quicken. Not yet. I typed it again, slower this time. Careful. Intentional. Password error. That got my attention. A quiet sense of unease slipped under my ribs like ice water. I sat back, watching the cursor blink with patient finality. One more try. This time, my hands were steady but my mind was sharpening, every sense stretching forward like antennae. Access denied. Account locked. It was just a screen. Just text. But I stared at it like I would an empty chair across the room, one where someone I used to love once sat. Something about the stillness around me, the absence of noise, made it feel like more than a glitch. Something inside me shifted. Tightened. I didn't panic. I didn't even sigh. I picked up the office phone and dialed IT. It rang twice before a young voice answered, male, uncertain, clearly reading from a screen. Ms. Morrow? I'm seeing that your system access was revoked this morning. At the request of your direct superior. There it was. That title again. Direct superior. The one Isolde had always favored, draping it over herself like a crown. I thanked him. Hung up. Closed the laptop. The soft click of it shutting felt unexpectedly loud, too final, like the period at the end of someone else's sentence. I sat there for a beat longer, then reached for the landline. Dialed the only number that still made me hesitate before hitting call. Mom, I said when she answered. I'd been locked out of my systems. There was a moment's pause. Then her voice came through, sugar-coated and perfectly casual, as if I'd told her I'd chipped a nail. Oh sweetheart, that must be a glitch. Don't worry, I'll have Isolde fix it. Probably just a routine reset. Behind her voice, I heard the unmistakable clink of porcelain, the gentle rhythm of a spoon stirring tea. Afternoon calm. Her version of control. It doesn't feel like a glitch, I replied. She hesitated, then her tone shifted. Softer. Coated in that practiced maternal gentleness she used the way some women use perfume, strategically. These things happen, darling. Let's not spiral, okay? I smiled without meaning to. Of course. Wouldn't want to ruin the narrative. She either missed the jab or chose to. Likely the latter. The call ended with a click so faint, I barely noticed it. But almost instantly, my phone buzzed again. A new email had landed in my personal inbox. Subject line, Board Realignment, Executive Seating Update. I opened it. My eyes skimmed past the header, then froze on the center of the screen. We would be honored if you would assume chairwoman capacity for the coming cycle. No fanfare. No explanation. Just a clear, sharp statement. The signature at the bottom was Renzo's, formal, definitive. The kind of name that didn't ask for permission. I read it again. Once. Twice. A third time. The words didn't feel like vindication. They didn't even feel like triumph. They felt like gravity. Heavy. Real. Inevitable. I sat with it in silence, letting the moment stretch. Sunlight crept slowly across the floorboards, warm and soft against the wood. The room stayed still, but inside me, something shifted. The future, suddenly reassembled in new shapes, began to click into place. Eventually, I stood. Opened the drawer to my right. Inside, where I had left it months ago, was a small silver flash drive. Its surface was cool in my hand. I plugged it into the laptop. The blue light pulsed to life like a heartbeat. One by one, I began gathering the pieces. Contracts. Emails. Photos. Financial summaries. Menu drafts with annotations in Isolde's handwriting. Internal memos she'd hoped were deleted. Each file copied into a folder titled with surgical clarity. Not to destroy. To document. Because when the truth is recorded, it doesn't die quietly. I named the folder, Evidence, Legacy. It wasn't a threat. It was a vault. Insurance with teeth. and then the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't my mother. It was her. Isolde. I let it ring once, then picked up. No pleasantries. You locked me out, I said, voice flat. A breath on the other end. Then her voice, smooth as ever. Polished. Calculated. You weren't aligned with our forward vision. You've been slowing us down. A laugh almost slipped out. I reined it in. You've been climbing a ladder I built. Silence. Then? You should have built higher, then. Click. She was gone. I sat there, phone in hand, the dial tone fading into silence. But it didn't hurt. Not anymore. It didn't even sting. It confirmed everything. Women like Isolde always mistake quiet for weakness. They believe silence means surrender. That stillness equals submission. But I've always done my best thinking in quiet rooms. I reopened Renzo's email. My fingers hovered for only a second before I typed the response, I accept. Then I opened the folder again. Dragged the files into a new email. To Board of Directors. Subject, for clarity before consensus. Body, empty. Attachments, evidence, legacy. No need for a message. The files spoke louder than I ever could. When I hit send, the room changed. Not visibly. Not audibly. But something in the air shifted. Like the way it feels when a thunderstorm is gathering just beyond the horizon. Static. Alive. I leaned back in my chair. Inhaled slowly. They wanted my silence, I murmured. They can have my clarity instead. The house around me exhaled in stillness, but not the fearful kind. This was a charged quiet. One that vibrated with purpose. Evening was rolling in now. The sky outside turned deep gray blue, clouds crowding low like they had something to say. I stood by the window just as the first droplets of rain struck the glass, leaving streaks like dark ink on wet paper. The smell of rain hit next, metallic, electric, familiar. My father used to say storms cleanse the air before it breaks. A notification lit up on my phone. Renzo again. One line. The board will convene tomorrow at 9. Be early. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Not cruel. Not smug. Just clear. They had taken my access, yes. But in doing so, they'd handed me something infinitely more powerful. The truth. Organized. Documented. Timed. They had confused my composure for compliance for years. Tomorrow, they'd finally understand. Silence is not the absence of power. Sometimes, it's just the sound of someone preparing to strike. The next morning, I woke before the alarm. The city outside still wore the gray of dawn, quiet and watchful. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, breathing in the stillness, the air thick with the faint scent of rain. It wasn't fear I felt, it was readiness. That rare kind of calm that comes after you've already decided. By 8:30, I was standing in front of the glass doors of the boardroom. The Charleston skyline stretched across the windows behind me, pale light spilling into the room. I arrived early, as Renzo had told me to. The table was long, polished to a mirror shine. My reflection looked back, composed, centered, no tremor in my hands. I placed the folder under my arm on the table and set the flash drive beside it. The screen at the far end of the room was already preloaded with the presentation, no sound, no slides, just truth waiting its turn. For a few minutes, it was only me and the quiet hum of the building. I thought of my father then, how he used to say, integrity doesn't need applause. It only needs light. I smiled softly at the memory, steadying my breath. The door opened. Renzo entered first, nodding at me. You're early, he said. I didn't want anyone else defining what this is before it starts. One by one, the others filed in, shareholders, advisors, the same people who'd smiled politely through every version of my sister's success story. Then came Isolde. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor. She stopped halfway into the room when she saw me sitting at the head of the table. Her expression faltered for only a second, then settled into that careful confidence she'd spent her life rehearsing. You're in my seat, she said lightly, as though it were a joke. I met her gaze. That's what we're here to clarify. Behind her, Maribel entered, dressed impeccably as always. Her face carried that mask of worry she used when she wanted to appear neutral. She sat near the corner, her eyes moving between us like a referee hoping no one would bleed. The silence wasn't tense, it was clean. Clarifying. Renzo stood. His voice carried easily in the quiet room. We're here for transparency. For correction. He glanced at me, then at the others. There have been inconsistencies in the record, creative, financial, historical. This is a chance to align the truth with what we claim to represent. He gestured toward me. Ms. Morrow, please. I pressed the button on the remote. The screen came alive. First came the documents, contracts, invoices, meeting notes, all marked with my initials. Then emails, timestamps, kitchen logs, original menu drafts. Each image appeared, paused, then faded into the next. It was meticulous, impossible to argue. No commentary. No dramatics. Just the truth unfolding at its own pace. At first, no one spoke. Then a murmur rippled down the table. One of the board members leaned forward. Isolde, these are your files? Isolde's jaw tightened. They're old records. Out of context. Context doesn't erase authorship, I said softly. Her eyes snapped to mine. You think this makes you a hero? No, I said. It makes me a witness. Renzo's tone was even, almost gentle. Let's allow the facts to finish speaking. He advanced the next slide, a video still from the gala tribute, frames of my sister's speech, the company's milestones, the missing years where my work had quietly held everything together. I heard someone shift in their seat. Another cleared their throat. The weight of the room shifted subtly, like air rearranging itself around a new truth. When the presentation ended, Renzo turned to me. Would you like to say something before we proceed to the vote? I stood. The chair legs scraped softly against the floor. I don't want anyone removed, I said. I want the story corrected. I want the seat filled by someone who earned it, not inherited it through convenience. Isolde's laugh was short, brittle. You think this is justice? I looked at her, really looked. No. This is memory with a spine. The words hung there, quiet but solid. Renzo nodded once, signaling the board. Then we'll vote. Hands rose slowly, one after another. No hesitation, no argument. The motion passed. Effective immediately, he said, the chairwoman's position is reassigned to Ms. Deleth Morrow. The sound of those words filled the air like music I hadn't heard in years. Isolde sat still, her smile frozen. This is ridiculous, she murmured, too low for the others but loud enough for me. Renzo leaned forward. Ms. Isolde will retain a ceremonial title, non-voting, of course. Maribel didn't move. Her hands were folded neatly on the table, eyes fixed somewhere just beyond me. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence was its own confession. When the meeting adjourned, the others left quickly, the sound of their footsteps fading down the corridor. Only I remained. The room was still. The screen had gone black again. I walked to the center of the table, unplugged the flash drive, and held it for a moment in my palm. It was small, unremarkable, yet it had done what years of pleading never could. I looked around. The chair I used to sit in, down the line, near the door, was still there. The same view I'd had for years. Forgotten, peripheral. Now I walked past it, past the shadow it represented, and paused by the head seat. My seat. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was taking something. I was reclaiming it. They erased my name, I said softly, running a hand along the smooth edge of the table. I had it engraved instead. The morning light slanted through the windows, catching the faint shine of the metal nameplate in front of me, Chairwoman, Deleth Morrow. I smiled, quiet and sure. The city outside was waking up again, unaware that the balance inside this room had shifted forever. I picked up my bag, turned off the light, and left the room. The click of the door closing behind me sounded final but peaceful. Some victories don't roar, they whisper, then echo. A week had passed since the vote. The world hadn't changed, not outwardly. Charleston still woke in gold, the sun spilling across rooftops like honey. The air still carried spring's mood swings, damp in the morning, crisp by afternoon. Pedestrians still crossed the street with coffee in hand. Kids still played in parks that smelled of damp earth and pollen. But inside my home, something had shifted. Not louder. Just quieter. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from absence, but from something finding its rightful place. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, letting the cool of the tile press up through the soles of my feet. The kettle whistled, a soft, breathy scream, and I poured hot water into an old ceramic mug. The one my father used every morning when he was still here. It had a chipped handle, a faded inscription that read, "Rise steady." I used to run my thumb over those words without thinking. Now I noticed them more. They felt like something he'd left behind, not by accident, but by design. A message tucked into routine. The portfolio was shelved now. The flash drive, too. Not buried. Just resting. Like stories that no longer needed to prove they happened. The kitchen clock ticked behind me in its usual rhythm. I sat at the small table, hands curled around the mug, the porcelain warm against my skin. The chair at the head of the table, the one that had once meant something, once felt like a throne or a reminder, was just a chair again. I didn't avoid it. I didn't sit in it to make a point. I just let it be. That was the new rhythm, no declarations, no speeches. Just the slow, sacred work of letting things return to their natural shape. Healing doesn't arrive with trumpets. It arrives with permission, soft, steady, often unnoticed. Later that morning, the bell rang. I opened the door to find Callan, Isolde's son, standing there with his weekend backpack in one hand and a drawing in the other. The nanny gave me a tight-lipped smile. "His mom has meetings," she said. "She asked if you could keep him today." Of course she did. I opened the door wider. "Come on in, Callan." He ran past me like a gust of joy, his feet pounding against the floor, arms flapping like wings. That kind of energy, unapologetic, uncontained, only belongs to children. At breakfast, he sat across from me, legs too short to reach the ground. His spoon hovered mid-air. "Delith," he said, voice curious, not hesitant. "Is it true you started the first restaurant?" I blinked. "Who told you that?" "I saw a picture," he said. "Not in the house. In someone's drawer." I smiled, though it pulled at something deeper. "Yes. I helped build it." He frowned. "Why didn't they tell me?" I reached across the table and tapped his small hand. "Sometimes grown-ups forget how stories begin." He nodded solemnly, like that made sense. Maybe it did. Maybe children understand things adults have been taught to hide. That night, after he'd fallen asleep on the couch halfway through a cartoon, I heard a knock. I opened the door to find Maribel. No flowers. No pretense. Just her, standing there like she didn't quite know why she came. She looked tired, not in the way makeup can hide, but in the way truth eventually reveals. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She sat at the table, not at the head. Just nearest to the window, where the light from the kitchen spilled soft across the floor. Her eyes traveled slowly over the room, like she was measuring how much she didn't know. "I read the board minutes," she said. I poured her tea. "No sugar." She didn't ask. "And?" I asked. "You did what you thought was right." I sat across from her. "And you?" She stared at her hands. I thought loyalty meant choosing aversion. We let the silence linger. It didn't bite. It breathed. After a moment, she stood. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. But her hand brushed my shoulder lightly as she passed, a quiet acknowledgement. Like someone agreeing, at last, that the chapter should end where it always should have. The next morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Hand-folded envelope. A little worn at the edges. Inside was a photograph. Me and my father, standing outside the original restaurant. I was maybe 8. Wearing overalls. Holding scissors from the ribbon cutting. My hair in a crooked braid. His hand was firm on my shoulder. His smile calm. On the back, in faded ink. "She built the bones." No signature. But I didn't need one. Some truths don't require attribution. That afternoon, I drove out to the site of that first restaurant. It had been closed for years. The paint peeled at the windows. The sign was half hanging. The door, still intact, reflected the trees behind me like a memory stuck between glass and sky. But the plants had survived. Little green shoots broke through cracks in the sidewalk. Tiny blooms leaned toward the light. The place had been forgotten by most. But not by everything. I stepped up to the entrance. Placed my palm against the glass. No fanfare. No closure speech. Just presence. From my coat pocket, I pulled out a single white flower. I knelt, placed it at the base of the door, petals brushing the concrete like a whisper. It wasn't a memorial. It was a promise. I didn't need them to clap. I didn't need them to remember out loud. Because I had remembered. And that was enough. I had written my story. Quietly. carefully. With hands that had carried rooms. With memory, and truth, and a spine built from all the times I was asked to stay silent. They erased me from theirs. So I wrote one where I didn't need their permission to exist. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with a breath. A name finally spoken with reverence. A truth placed carefully where no one can throw it away again. Have you ever had to reclaim your place, not loudly, not dramatically, but so undeniably that silence could no longer hold it? Have you ever waited for the world to see what you never stopped being? If this story moved something in you, don't forget to subscribe. Because more stories are coming. Stories that remember what others tried to forget. And some that never let you be erased again.